And welcome to Technology Tap. I'm Professor J. Rod. Today, the code breakers, Bletchley Park, and the birth of modern computers. Let's tap in. All right, and welcome to our series that we do on Sundays, which is the history of modern computing. I'm Professor J. Rod, and today we're going to do the code breakers, Bletchley Park, and the birth of modern computing. We're going to journey to the shadow halls where computing was not yet a career, but a matter of life and death. This is the story of Bletchley Park, a quiet estate in the English countryside that became the birthplace of modern computing. Here, mathematicians and linguists, chess champions and crossword fanatics joined forces to fight a war of logic, where victory depended not on bullets, but on bits. When information became a weapon, computation became survival. The code that couldn't be broken. Long before laptops and networks, nations fought with paper, ink, and radio waves. By the 1930s, the new battlefield was invisible, the ether, filled with encrypted transmission that carried troop movements and top-secret commands. Germany led this war of secrecy with a device called the Enigma. It looked like a typewriter, but inside were spinning rotors that scrambled each letter into chaos. Every day, the machine's settings changed, creating 150 quintillion possible combinations. To the Allies, the Enigma was unbreakable. To a handful of mathematicians in Poland, it was a challenge. The first cracks in Enigma came not from armies, but from algebra. The Polish breakthrough. In 1932, three Polish mathematicians, Marian Rajkowski, Jerry Roszkis, and Henry Zajewski, quietly began studying German cipher. Working in secrecy at the Polish Cipher Bureau, they used mathematics rather than espionage to model the internal wiring of Enigma. Rajkowski built what he called a Bombe cryptologic Senha, a machine that can test Enigma's rotor settings automatically. It was the first mechanical attempt to outthink a computer before computers existed. By 1939, the Polish team had solved Enigma, but the war was closing in. They shared everything with the British and French just weeks before the German invasion of Poland. The spark of modern computation was lit in Warsaw, then carried west as Europe burned. Bletchley Park awakens. Northwest of London set a Victorian mansion surrounded by hedges and quiet gardens, Bletchley Park. In August of 1939, the British government code and cipher school took over the property. Within weeks, it became the most secret workplace on earth. Cambridge and Oxford recruits arrived under vague invitations. You are to assist the War Office in a special duty. There were no uniforms, only nicknames and locked huts numbered instead of named. Among those arrivals were a quiet mathematician from Cambridge named Alan Turing. The mind of Alan Turing. Alan Turing had already changed mathematics before the war began. In 1936, his paper Uncomputable Numbers described a theoretical device, later called the Turing machine, that could execute any logical instrument given enough time and memory. He had invented, in theory, the modern computer. At Bletchley, Turing applied the same logic to the German Enigma. He realized the only way to beat a machine that changed faster than humans could think was to build another machine to outthink it. The mind that imagined the computer now needed it to save civilization. The birth of the bomb. Turing, along with engineer Gordon Welchman, designed the bombe, B-O-M-B-E, an electrical mechanical monster of rotating drums that tested thousands of Enigma possibilities per minute. Each bombe was taller than a man, lined with spinning cylinders wired to simulate the Germans' machine motors. Operators, often women from the German Royal Navy Service, loaded plugboards, pressed start, and listened to the rhythmic world of the logic turn into motion. When the bombe stopped, it revealed a possible key, the day's configuration. Analysis then compared it to known German phrases like Hail Hitler, weather reports, routine words to confirm a match. Within months, Bletchley's team was reading German messages faster than they could translate. Each rotation of the bombe was a heartbeat of reason in the chaos of war. The Hidden Army. At its peak, 9,000 people worked at Bletchley Park. Linguists, mathematicians, clerks, translators, engineers. 2/3 were women. They came from every background. Debutantes, students, secretaries, scientists. Each handled fragments. A code group, a translation, a wiring diagram, never the whole picture. The secret was absolute. Letters home said nothing. Parents believed their daughters were filing papers somewhere in the countryside. Only decades later did the world learn what they accomplished. History remembers the heroes with medals. Computing began with those who kept quiet. The impact of intelligence. The decrypted Enigma machine, codenamed Ultra, gave the Allies the upper hand in the Battle of the Atlantic. They could now track U-boats, reroute convoys, and predict attacks before they happened. Historians estimate Ultra shortened the war by 2 years and saved millions of lives. But there was another outcome, one invisible at the time. The race to break codes had turned into the first race to build computers. War didn't just invent new weapons, it invented new ways to think. And that's next. We will continue with Bletchley Park and the birth of modern computing. But across the channel, a new cipher machine appeared, one even more complex, more dangerous, and designed to outproduce every Allied analysis. This is the story of Colossus, the first true electronic computer, born from necessity, built in secret, and almost erased from history. Sometimes inventions hide behind classifications, waiting decades to be recognized as revolution. The Lorenz challenge. In 1941, Germany needed a cipher more secure than Enigma for its highest level communications. Hitler's orders, OKW's strategic plans, and messages to field marshals. They turned to a new machine called the Lorenz SZ40, later the SZ42. Unlike Enigma's keyboards and rotors, Lorenz used teleprinter signals, the ones and zeros of the bolt code, to encrypt text over radio teletype links. To the Allies, it was a ghost in the airwaves, faster, more mathematical, and utterly impenetrable. But so often in history, luck and human error opens a crack. In August 1941, a German operator sent the same message twice using the same Lorenz key settings, a fatal mistake. The message was intercepted at the Y station at Q and forwarded a new team of mathematical analysis in North London known as the Tessery and the Neumann. One repeated message can expose an empire's secrets. At the center of this new battle was a young mathematician named Bill Tutte. He had no military training, just brilliant mind for patterns. Working only from intercepted ciphertext without ever seeing a Lorenz machine, Tutte reverse engineered its entire logical structure. He discovered that the Lorenz used 12 wheels to generate a complex pattern of bits that were XOR'd with the plain text, a process that would later define digital encryption. Total analysis was a mathematical miracle, but solving by hand took weeks. The war moved in days. To keep up, the analysis needed a machine faster than any electromechanical bomb, something that could test thousands of logical conditions per second. Bletchley's next leap will be not mechanical, it will be electronic. Enter Tommy Flowers, an engineer from the General Post Office Research Station at Dallas Hills. Flowers was an expert in telephone switching system, machines that use vacuum tubes to route calls faster than relays. When he heard about the Lorenz problem, Flowers proposed a radical idea: build an entirely electronic computer using thermatic valves, tubes that can switch at thousands of times per second. His supervisor laughed. Valves were unreliable. No one believed they could build a machine with 2,000 of them. But Flowers knew if it kept powered continuously, the valves would be stable. He went ahead anyway, funding much of the prototype himself. By 1943, Colossus Mark I was ready. It stood 7 feet tall and weighed a ton, and used 2,500 tubes. When switched on, paper tape raced through its readers at 5,000 characters per second. Electronic logic circuits tested each possible wheel pattern and printed probable keys to a teleprompter. Every pulse of a Colossus was a binary heartbeat of modern computation. Speed as a weapon. Colossus arrived at Bletchley Park in January 1944. Its impact was immediate. Where hand methods took weeks, Colossus solved a Lorenz message in hours. It could run statistical tests on 5,000 characters per second, blinding speed for its time. By June 1944, 10 Colossus were operational. The intelligence they produced were codenamed Tunny. Tunny decrypts revealed the disposition of German forces before D-Day. Commanders knew where the Panzer divisions waited, how many troops guarded Canales versus Normandy. Beyond the largest invasion in history stood an array of machines no one could admit existed. Inside Bletchley's wooden huts, the atmosphere was both ordinary and intense. Operators worked in 8-hour shifts, feeding tapes, checking printouts, listening for the next crucial message. They couldn't talk about what they did, not to family, not to friends, not for decades. Alan Turing moving between projects from Enigma to speech encryption to mathematical research that would later define AI. Tommy Flowers maintained his machines like living creatures, causing them to run day and night without failure. The hum of Colossus became the soundtrack to victory. In a war of steel and fire, these were the quietest battles ever fought. Secrecy and silence. When the war ended in 1945, the Colossus was dismantled. Blueprints were burned. Operators were sworn to silence under the Official Secrets Act. Even as the post-war computing flourished with ENIAC in America and EDSAC in Cambridge, the true first electronic computer remained a classified secret. Alan Turing received no public credit. Tommy Flowers returned to his post office, his contribution buried by secrecy. Progress without recognition is a sacrifice too few remember. Rediscovery. Decades later, in the 1970s, as computing historians traced their discipline's roots, the truth finally emerged. Former codebreakers began to speak. Documents were declassified. Tommy Flowers was recognized as the engineer who built the first programmable electronic digital computer. At Bletchley Park, a full-scale reconstruction of Colossus Mark II was later completed in 2007, a whirling, clicking tribute to the machine that helped win the war and ignite the computer age. Some inventions don't just change the future, they create the language of it. When the bomb stopped spinning and the Colossus fell silent, the world moved on. But the ideas born at Bletchley Park did not die with the war. They were seeded in secret labs, universities, and the minds of those who've seen what machines can do. This is a story of how codebreakers laid the foundations for everything we call computing. When the machines went quiet, their logic kept thinking in the minds of those who built them. The victory over Nazi Germany was complete, but Bletchley Park remained a secret until the 70s. For decades, its staff could not speak of what it was done. Alan Turing returned to academic work at Manchester University, Tommy Flowers to the post office. No honors, no publications, no fanfare, just silence. And yet, beneath that silence, history was shifting. Turing now imagined machines that could think. Flowers, vacuum tubes inspire designers at Cambridge and Princeton to push electronics further. Claude Shannon in America published his 1948 paper on information theory using the same binary logic Turing had envisioned a decade earlier. The end of one war became the beginning of another, the war for understanding information itself. At Manchester in 1948, Turing helped build one of the first stored program computers, but he wasn't content with speed or storage. He wanted to know if the machines could learn. His 1950 essay, Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence, asked a simple question. Can machine think? He proposed a test, the imitation game, to see if a machine response could be indistinguishable from humans. The test became the basis for modern artificial intelligence. Turing has already taught machines to calculate. Now he wanted to teach them to understand. But his country did not reward his brilliance. In 1952, Turing was prosecuted for homosexuality, then a crime in Britain. He lost his security clearance, his career, and tragically, his life 2 years later. It took 60 years for the British government to apologize and nearly 70 for a royal pardon. Yet his legacy never needed permission. It was already running in every machine that could follow a logic path. He built the future that outlived the prejudice of his present. From codebreakers to computing. The idea conceived at Bletchley spread quickly after the war. In Cambridge, Maurice Wilkins built the ENIAC in 1949, the first stored program computer to perform useful calculations. In America, John von Neumann proposed a new architect, instructions and data stored in the same memory, the model every computer still used today. Behind each blueprint was the ghost of Bletchley, switches, relays, and logic gates that could remember, compare, and decide. The difference between a cipher machine and a computer was only a matter of purpose. As peace settled, that purpose changed, from decoding messages to solving scientific problems, then to running businesses and government. By the 1950s, machines once built for war were calculating ballistics, bank ledgers, and even the path of planets. Humanity has created a tool for reason itself. Tommy Flower and the Lost Engineer. When Turing's name faded into academic footnotes, Tommy Flowers continued working quietly on the communication systems. His electronic switching methods became the foundation for post-war telephone and eventually computer circuit design. But for decades, his achievement, Colossus, remained classified. He could not list it on a resume or claim its inventions and patents. Others built upon his work without knowing his name. When his story finally surfaced in the 70s, Flowers was already retired. Reporters asked how it felt to build the first computer and never been credited. He smiled and said, "I did its job. That was enough." The measure of innovation isn't recognition, it's results. Bletchley Park reborn. By the 1990s, historians and volunteers fought to save Bletchley Park from demolitions. They succeeded. Today, the site is a museum and heritage center, home to the reconstructed Colossus Mark II. Visitors stand in awe as paper tape flies through its reader and lights blink across its panels. Children see it not as an artifact of war, but as ancestors of their laptops and phones. Every modern microchip is a descendant of those rotors and valves spinning in a country house. Legacy in logic. From Bletchley codebreakers came three legacies. First, the technology, electronic computing, binary logic, and automation. Second, the methods, teamwork across discipline, mathematics, engineering, linguistics. And the third, the ethos, the belief that knowledge itself can defend freedom. These principles will shape everything from NASA mission control to the internet age. When machines learn to serve us, it's the human who must stay ethical. From codebreakers to cybersecurity. In a sense, we're all Bletchley now. Every encrypted email, every password, every cyber attack we defend, carries the DNA of their work. The mathematics of Turing and Tuttle live in RSA encryption, block ciphers, and machine learning models. The logic that once defeated Enigma now protects bank accounts and nations. The war for information never ended. It just moved online. Bletchley Park was a secret for 30 years, yet its echoes will last for centuries. From Turing's logic to Flowers' engineering, from mathematicians to the thousands of women who kept the machines running, they did more than win a war. They provided the intelligence, human or machine, it's most powerful when it serves a moral purpose. Perhaps the greatest code they ever wrote was the one that remains unbroken, the example of courage and reason in time of fear. And I hope that, we've seen the story. We all have seen, if we are IT guys, we've seen that imitation game, and we've seen what the government did with Alan Turing. But it shows that it was at that time. This is one of the reasons why they call the greatest generation, is because of the sacrifices and the commitment that they dedicated themselves in order to defeat the Nazis. Right? They did whatever it took to win the war. And I'm afraid that sense of social responsibility and patriotism may not exist today, because times have changed. But back then they did what they had to do. And, I tip my hat off to them. And, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have a job. Like, I wouldn't have a job, right? Teaching cybersecurity if it wasn't for them. So, I'm extremely grateful to them. And obviously they help us win the war, which was one of the greatest accomplishments that they made. But to have your work acknowledged, that must have been a killer. That must have hurt. That must have stung really hard. Not, because you want people to know, like, hey, I did this. But it's good that at least, Flowers was acknowledged later on. Turing, this, at least his family maybe got some recognition or acknowledgement that he did what he had to do, regardless of all the personal stuff that he had going on, that he was able to do what he had to do to win the war for the Allies. So my hat's off to both, and to everyone who served in World War II and served in the Bletchley Park and all the other encryptions, all around as far as Allies is concerned. All right. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the codebreakers, Bletchley Park, and the birth of modern computing. I'm Professor J-Rod, and this has been Technology Tap. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and as always, keep tapping into technology. This has been a presentation of Little Cha-Cha Productions, art by Sarah, music by Joe Kim. We're now part of the Pod Match Network. You can follow me at TikTok at Professor J-Rod, that's J-R-O-D, or you can email me at ProfessorJrod, J-R-O-D, at gmail.com.